I don't think that anyone in the Tasmanian community could really believe their ears when it turned out that the Greens are now opposed to a net zero 2030 target here in Tasmania. It's truly been one of the most bizarre displays of anti-everything since Bob Brown was opposed to building a hydroelectric dam, and his solution was to build a coal-fired power station in the Fingal Valley. I mean, we know what you people are about. You're not about the environment. You're not about making people's lives better. You're just fundamentally anti-capitalism, anti-jobs. You talk about wanting to make sure that kids in regional Tasmania can grow up with a bright future. Well, to be honest, Mr Deputy Speaker, we know what they're about. The depopulation and the deindustrialisation of Tasmania. They want us to all withdraw into the suburb of South Hobart and hope that we can live off government benefits for the rest of our lives. Mr Deputy Speaker, it is a sad indictment of where the Greens have got themselves to, that they're now opposed to net zero 2030. They've got no plan how to get there because they're opposed to hydro. They're opposed to wind farms. I mean, Scott Jordan said that the wind farm that's proposed just north of Granville Harbour, the best wind farm in the country, would be a wind farm apocalypse. I mean, these people are completely out of their mind, Mr Deputy Speaker. They're opposed to trees, the ultimate renewable. They're opposed to wind farms. They're opposed to hydro. They're opposed to fish farms, which are some of the most environmentally friendly protein that you can possibly eat if you're a human being. I mean, maybe they're into crickets and grubs and whatever else, Mr Deputy Speaker. But the fundamental point about what we do here in Tasmania is that we are some of the most sustainable native forestry operators in the world. The alternative to Tasmanian hardwoods is going into orangutan habitat in Borneo and ripping the joint up, because that's what happens when you shut down a sustainably managed industry and you ship it offshore. We're already an importer of timber in this country. We're already an importer of timber, Mr Deputy Speaker, and you know where it comes from? It comes from countries that can't look after the place, that trash their forests. You want to take Tasmanian jobs away so that you can send it up to Indonesia and you can wreck the joint. That's what you guys are about, because you're fundamentally anti-everything. People have cottoned on to you guys. That's why there's only two of you sitting here. There used to be five when Ms O'Connor became the leader of the Greens. If you can call it leadership, Mr Deputy Speaker. She has fundamentally failed in trying to look after the environment. And when a party that actually comes in here and is serious about governing says that we're going to get to net zero in 2030, what do they say? Oh, it's greenwashing. I mean, Mr Deputy Speaker, the swing is on from the Greens, we keep getting told, but look, I don't think they'll ever get there because they continue to trash every bit of credibility that they've got. Anyone that's ever seen a Knighton's plantation compared to some of our sustainably managed native regrowth in the Arthur Pieman will be able to tell you that the fire risk that you have from a Knighton's plantation is far higher than what you get from a sustainably managed native forestry operation. And Mr Deputy Speaker, that's their alternative. Their alternative is to shut down native forestry in this state and replace it with plantations. Well, it's quite plain to everyone that the fire risk from a plantation is far higher than native forestry. And the alternative to timber, Mr Deputy Speaker, is concrete, which is a coal byproduct, steel, which is a coal byproduct, plastic, which is an oil byproduct. Mr Deputy Speaker, they have no plan for the future of our civilisation because they prefer that we shut everything down and that we live in mud huts. I mean, at least we'd probably get to whatever they want more than net zero by 2030. But Mr Deputy Speaker, it is fundamentally a failure of leadership, which is what we're all meant to be doing in this place, to come in here and say that we shouldn't have native forestry, that we shouldn't get to net zero by 2030, that we shouldn't have mining, particularly for some of our sustainable rare earths, which is what we do down the West Coast, Mr Deputy Speaker. I mean, they've whinged and complained about who's in this place at whatever particular time. These people couldn't even be bothered to show up for the workplace protection motion. And we know that the Labor Party are lazy. I did think better of Ms O'Connor, but to come in here and whinge about people's presence in this place is true hypocrisy on this day. We know that less than 1%, Mr Deputy Speaker, about 0.27% of our native forests are harvested here in Tasmania in any given year. We've got got over 1 million hectares of Tasmania's old-growth forests. That's about 85% that are permanently protected.
Not true.
And you know what? We don't get most of the benefit in terms of our carbon accounting because they're already locked up. Mr Deputy Speaker, they're fundamentally opposed to common sense and decent management. Tasmania was the first Australian jurisdiction to achieve net zero emissions, did so for the first time in 2013, consistently done so under this government since 2015. And research also shows that a mixed strategy of conservation and timber production is more likely to be optimal for atmospheric carbon reduction, but it's also more likely, Mr Deputy Speaker, to be the better solution when it comes to managing fire risk. That's the thing that these people don't fundamentally understand when they go back to their apartments in South Hobart, is that the rest of us live in the real world. We live around trees, we live near the bush, and we want to look after the joint. And we know that that it's going to be harder if it's all plantations. We're committed to a long-term sustainable management of Tasmania's forests for the benefit of all Tasmanians, not just the whingers that the Greens think that they should be representing. The government's continually monitoring new scientific research like this to ensure that we regulate forestry in a contemporary way that's best practice.
For debate has expired. The question is that the motion be agreed to.